wait, we're supposed to look at the camera when we talk. That's right.
I don't know. Does that make it scary?
We're just like dead eyeball staring at the whole time.
Welcome back.
Maybe. But I do know a little bit of what we're talking about. I was going to pretend that I didn't know anything that we're talking about tonight, but I do know.
You're just going to lie to everyone right off the bat.
But this is a great topic because I think it's one that people don't really understand.
I agree. And I think I am one of those people. So
Well,
that we're talking
I know.
about
I think
it.
as we identified, I am going to notice myself feeling like I should have taught you, but then it's taught you something I didn't know that I didn't know.
Yeah. So we'll learn some things.
Okay.
But this is the Mind the Mirror and Me podcast. I'm your host, Mackie Overbay. This is my dad, Tony Overbay.
Hello, Mackie.
Okay. Don't make it weird. Don't make it weird.
Okay.
But we're talking about boundaries.
Yeah.
Today. Specifically, I mean, this is one thing that I feel like I don't know enough about, but I think I almost act like I do.
Yeah.
Like I'm kind of like, set those boundaries, like that thing.
Right.
And then when it really comes down to it, I don't know a lot about it, but I felt like at the last week, I had like 3 clients where I had the same conversation where there was some form, whether it was with friends or work or something, where it was like something about boundaries. And then again, I sit there and I kind of act like, you deserve to set those boundaries and you like do this. And then when I'm really looking at it, I'm like, okay, I'm not good at setting boundaries.
Yeah.
I don't really even know how to or what it even means.
Yeah.
And so so today's episode is more so I wrote down some questions that I just kind of want to ask you, the therapist.
Yes.
Because I'm hoping you know.
And I do now because, but I had to learn. And I don't know if you see up on the other screen, it made me, I don't know if you're going to cover this at all. No. But okay, boundary versus ultimatum, and put that for those listening, put a little pin in that one, because I really think that becomes the biggest difference, that we oftentimes assume what we are doing is setting a boundary when really what we're doing is presenting an ultimatum, because an ultimatum really is designed to control somebody else, so an ultimatum will focus on somebody else's behavior. And then a boundary is something about our own, what we want, our own limits. Versus the ultimatum is like, the boundary will look more like, I am no longer going to participate in or be subjected to, but then the ultimatum is, I need you to stop this. And I think that's I know. And sometimes I feel like it can be that simple in a sense. Yeah.
Okay, let me read just 2 quotes I looked up. I can't even really remember what they are. Let me read one and then we'll see if it says, I think so often what people misunderstand about boundaries is that the point of setting boundaries is not to change other people's behavior or convince them to value different things. It's to advocate for yourself regardless of how they respond.
Perfect. That's so good. Yeah. We're so good. We're so on board. And I love it what if we're the only 2 people that didn't really get it? And everybody else is like, okay, I knew that one. No, I don't think, I know that this is something I deal with on a regular basis as a therapist.
Well, because you said something in one of our episodes where we mentioned a word and I can't remember what it was. And I think you called it a buzzword. You said something was a buzzword. Yeah,
I think I was even, there's a lot of them, even whether it's like gaslighting or narcissist or differentiation like even. That's why I went so deep into that.
Do you almost say that boundaries are kind of falling in? I feel like
absolutely.
A lot.
I think I would absolutely do it. Yeah.
I would like to think I'm not the only person that sits there and is like, I know everything about boundaries.
No, because everyone. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you want to get there or tell me when. And I want to say for those listening at home, which would be everybody listening, Mackie, I really love hearing more from Mackie, and I will beat myself up a little bit when I talk more. But then you, and going into this one, said, no, old man.
Yeah, I am asking the therapist questions that knows the things. I'm the 23-year-old who doesn't know anything.
Yeah. Well, so go through some of your stuff here, because I know there's some things I know that I will get to, because the boundaries, there's a big part of the work I do in emotional immaturity and on my Waking Up to Narcissism podcast, or one of the 5 behaviors that I talk about is specifically about this, which is why I've had to learn so much about it. Okay.
So just right off the bat, without reading a definition, what is your idea of what boundaries are?
Oh, and now just because it's funny because I want to still look on this screen over there, but it really is, it's something that I have decided that I would rather not have, or it's something that I want to express that I'm unwilling to participate in, engage in. And the key being, it's a me thing. So if a couple starts to, they get really angry and they yell at each other. Yeah. So I just did another episode on the Waking Up to Narcissism podcast about the amygdala hijack. So if somebody really pushes another person's buttons and they know you're this, you're that, you're this, sometimes they're almost doing it subconsciously or intentionally to get the other person angry, because when they get angry, then they're cortisol levels increase, and then their brain starts to flood like the stress hormone, and then they can't access the part of their brain that can make sense or logic. And so then they just react and they get really angry. And then that immature person gets to say, geez, calm down.
So they're purposely
They're
trying
purposely
to
doing it.
push a
Yeah.
button so you're
Yeah.
caught
Yeah.
and
So a lot of
react. Okay.
times, yeah. So then what I'll run into is if somebody is noticing that this person is now, and that's where the concepts like gaslighting starting to come in, where if I know that I'm not crazy, but then I end up out of a conversation going, wait a minute, now I feel insane.
Mm-hmm.
So going into it and I'm just asking a simple question, or I know, I had something happen that I want to bring up in the relationship. And then I notice that, oh, wait, this is the thing where, he or she or they is starting to then not make sense or putting it back on me. Then I need a boundary would be, oh, I'm going to walk away now. So that's like,
Okay.
I am setting a boundary there that I refuse to stay in a conversation where I'm not feeling heard or understood, or where someone is telling me that here's how I feel. They don't know how I feel. So that would be a boundary.
Because that's why then I feel like it's fair to say, or like we are very entitled to our boundaries, right? Like, so, because I feel like we've talked about this before, I'm kind of a pushover. I'm really easy to like.
I mean, I want to say something nice, but then I feel like,
No,
man, this is, but
I'm working on it. I'm trying, but I feel like
I handed you that gift of being a pushover though, because this is where
so
I've figured it out in my 40s or whatever,
Yeah, but so it's so I don't even know where to begin with boundaries in most cases, and there have been lots of situations that I've found myself in where I've like said yes to things I didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's little dumb things, and I'm practicing it now, I'm doing better, but it's so easy to just be like, okay, like whatever you say, whatever you do. But I think with everything we talk about, where we're all doing life for the first time on our own, doing our thing, it's like you're allowed to set whatever boundaries you deem necessary to yourself, right? Like that's fair.
100%.
Okay. That's scary, but that's fair. Like we're allowed to do that.
Let me tell you, there was a person that I met with, a woman who's a computer programmer that was here processing some grief, but then she told me a funny story that she said, I think you'll appreciate this. I've talked about it as a way to show what a secure attachment would look like with your kid growing up, or a boundary. Do you know the story?
I don't
Okay, so I think it'll even show us what a boundary could look like. Okay. So she was on a date, and then she was talking to this person, and the person said, wait, what do you do for work? And she said, I'm a computer programmer. And then he said, oh, I don't know. That's a pretty heavily male dominated industry, isn't it? And she just said, yeah. And then he just said, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. And it was funny because I wasn't asking you how you feel about it. You asked me what I do for work. Yeah. And she said, normally the next question is, how do you like it? What are you working on? Right.
You don't flip it on you.
No. And so what I thought was so impressive by what she was saying was that, she had grown up and she didn't have to defend herself. She didn't have to prove herself. So then here's somebody that is asking a question like that. And I feel like a nice guy syndrome or nice girl syndrome person who doesn't want somebody to feel uncomfortable might go, yeah, it is kind of weird. I don't know. But if it's like, that's a you thing, you can ask me questions. And so and at first I didn't even know exactly where she was going with it. And I thought, oh, that is brilliant, because she was raised in a way where I wasn't asking for your approval. I thought we were having a conversation. In her mind, she thought, check, please. We're done. Yeah. Isn't that? So does that kind of show a little bit what a boundary could be?
Yeah, a little bit. And I think even when you say it like that, it reminds me of, which again, we've mentioned this briefly, but I've talked about when I was in hair school and I'd be cutting guys' hair and they would say to me like,
oh yeah,
this is your backup. Like, what are you doing? And I think, again, I said like this last time, where in the moment at the beginning, like when I was first in hair school, somebody would say something like that to me and they'd be like, well, what are you going to do after? Are you still in school? Are you doing whatever? And because I didn't know how, I guess, then to set a boundary or to stand up for myself in that sense, I would just kind of be like, oh yeah, like I'm just going to do this for now. And like, maybe I'll still go, like,
well, isn't that funny?
Like that, yeah. I felt the need to, for whatever, couldn't just say, no, I'm good now. Where now, if somebody said something to me, I'd be like, I'm good. This is my career. This is what I'm doing. Like,
yeah. And it's funny because and when I first was a therapist, I found myself when somebody would say, yeah, I don't even know if I really believe in the whole therapy concept, I would feel like I had to defend all therapists. And now it's like, okay, well, that's a you thing. Yeah. I mean, I love what I do. Yeah, and I know that it helps people. So, okay. But it's like, that's part of the maturation process, I think. Because now it almost brings up a good point where I think we were talking earlier about when people first start setting boundaries, they almost swing that pendulum all the way over to the aggressive side. Because I know when you were first talking about the people at cosmetology school, where I wanted to say, wait, let me get this right. So here's a guy that's coming to get like a $2 haircut from you, but he's going to give you life advice. Yeah. That he rode over, and then I was being mean because I was like, did he pedal over on his bike? Did he ring the bell when he pulled up, or is he in his Maserati? I mean, which one, And then that's immature response of me. Hilarious, but immature.
It is funny.
Right. But that's where I think it is interesting. And a lot of times people like to try to tell somebody else what to think or feel or do to make themselves feel better. Because if they want that person to go, man, you're so smart, or
needs some validation.
Yeah, some validation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So they'll just do anything to find that.
Yeah. So I guess then that goes back to the my bad, not teaching those boundaries as a kid. And you know what we were talking about one time? And again, you can edit any and all of this out. But I remember we were at the pool table at home one time talking about just you had an exchange with somebody on a dating app. Okay. And it had gone really well until then the person kind of was pushing things a little bit and they just seemed a little weird. Okay. And I remember thinking, I think you had even said something like, it was kind of weird, but I didn't want to make the guy feel bad. Okay. And I feel like that's the example I get often when people, I think a lot of guys will start to they're just testing the water, so to speak. And that's where I feel like, a solid boundary would be, oh no, shut it down. Yeah, because if you're already doing that, or if somebody says, I'd really like to just get to know you first, and then they're saying, oh no, me too, and then I don't know, 30 minutes later, then here comes a sexual innuendo or something. Yeah. And if you're like, okay, I don't know, maybe he doesn't understand, or I need to. Yeah. And that's the part where I think boundaries could be pretty helpful.
Well, I think they're super helpful. And I think I'll give myself some props there because I don't know if you remember this one, which maybe it's the same conversation. I don't remember. But I had a guy on a dating app not too long ago message me, started saying some weird things. And so I immediately took a screenshot.
Yes.
And then he freaked out and he was like, why'd you screenshot that? And I was like, I'm just going to send it to your mom real quick.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
He lost his mind. Like, he was losing it. And
that's perfect, man.
I wasn't really going to send it to his mom, but I was just sitting there like, okay, like, there you go. Like,
and it is.
That, like, shows you something.
And we were, yes, that's spot on.
I was really proud of myself for that one.
No, I was too. And what was funny is I think that we were talking, the three of us, you, me, and your mom were talking earlier, even in that same day of that conversation. And I wish I could think of the context, but it was something about talking about not wanting somebody to feel bad. And that's where it really is, it sounds so mean at first, but if somebody feels bad about something I say, it is by definition a them issue. Now they can ask me questions about, hey, tell me what you mean by that. Because when I hear that, I feel like you're attacking me. But if I know I'm not, and that's that concept of being differentiated, of noticing, trying to separate my thoughts and feelings and emotions from another human's. And it's just so hard because if you're used to being a nice person and somebody else says, oh man, that made me feel bad. Then if I say, oh, I'm so sorry, period, then I feel like I'm being a jerk. But if I say, oh, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But it's like, but I said it because I'm a human. And this is the first time we've ever had this conversation in this moment. And check it out. That's what I said. Yeah. And that's part of what I love about being a therapist is when I can get a couple in and my pillar one of a connected conversation is assume good intentions, or there's a reason why somebody is saying what they're saying. Sometimes why they're saying it is because they did, because that's what they responded with. Now there can be curiosity next about, hey, tell me, that's where I want to say, then it's my pillars, right? Assuming good intentions, the second pillar, you can't tell somebody else that you disagree or you think that what they said is ridiculous, even if you disagree or what you think they said is ridiculous, because they said it because they did, because that's who they are. So that leads to my third pillar of questions before comments. Hey, tell me more about that. Like, tell me why I said no pushing sexual boundaries in text conversations and then you did. Like, tell me more about that. Yeah.
Let's dive into this.
And that's where, and that's where I always say that my four pillars are a framework where you will either get to a more connected conversation and learn more about somebody, or it will expose the immaturity for what it is. Because the person then my fourth pillar is you don't go into the bunker and become a victim and want the other person to rescue. You got to stay present. Because if he would have been like, man, you know what? You're right. I don't know why I do that. It's just wild.
Which no guy's ever done that.
No, that happens in marriages. Yeah. And so then, because then the wife's like, no, it's okay. I probably shouldn't have said it to you. And then the guy's like, yeah, it's okay. Okay. Right? So the boundary, I'm glad we're talking about this.
Yeah. Okay. So then that makes me go, okay. So you were saying that people won't do things because they don't want to make the other person
feel bad or uncomfortable.
Yeah. So
they doubt themselves.
Yeah. And then I feel like, because then does that go into, I feel like I've had this where even just like to avoid conflict, because I can think of a place that I worked and the boss there would like push some things like outside of work that I
Yes. Yeah.
didn't want to do. I had like casually made clear like I wasn't, they were things I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And this person still would push that later on. And I think there was a part of me where it wasn't even I don't want to make you feel bad. It was like I don't want to have the conversation. I don't want to have to like stand up for myself and say, hey, I don't do that, or I don't want to do that.
Right.
And so then it was easier to just kind of go along with it.
Yeah,
Okay,
for
whatever
sure.
you say. Like,
yeah. There's a concept of coercion or coercive control. Do you know
Okay.
that concept?
Not really.
And it's where a good example is I was talking to somebody that they were talking about, I think they were getting their PhD or something. And they were saying that a professor had said, you don't mind watching my pets while I go out of town for a week, do you? And the person felt like, okay, if I say no, then this could really affect my grade. But even if the professor says, I mean, you don't have to, but then so I feel like that happens.
Like, well,
Yeah.
still they're gonna like,
I know. I feel like that happens in
hold that
work
against me.
sometimes, like,
I
is
had a
that,
very similar situation
yeah.
to that
So I
where
think
it
that's,
was something personal life basically that I was being asked of, and it was like
yeah. And it's
maybe
where,
where I felt like I had to say, yeah, okay, I'll drop everything, like I'll be there, I'll do what you need me to do, and it's like,
and see, and here's where
you
Mackie,
didn't
this
have
is
to do
where
that.
I'll take that one. I'll take the blame because
You did that.
Oh, I did that because that's where I go back to this girl who was having this experience at the restaurant with this guy, and where it was pretty clear, I think, that she had always maybe been told or grown up and just, you're going to do what you're going to do, period, even if it's going to cost you your job or whatever, because that secure attachment means that, you always know you've got somebody there to back you up, which, I mean, I feel like we've done a decent job of letting you know that, but it's still, but when you get to a certain point, I know that people don't want to have to rely on that. So, because there's one of the hard things about setting boundaries, you have to accept the fact that other people are going to react a certain way. And that could even be, they may fire you. They may triangulate and get other people against you, or and that's part of well, I don't want that. Well, then I'm basically saying, well, then I'm saying that I will, I will have squishy boundaries. And this is where I feel like, unfortunately, it just becomes easier. I think the more comfortable you get or confident you get in your own skin, in your profession, I feel like I'm in the place now where if somebody's telling me, well, I don't know, I don't like the way you do a certain thing in therapy. Okay. I mean, I don't.
Because then, do you just kind of get to the point where it's like, well, I'm going to hold my boundary, and if you're not going to respect that, then I actually don't really want you around.
I get, yes, I get to say that as from my chair where it's the cliched, but yet very true. Well, then is that person really a friend, or is that because
you kind of open the door
you do, because I think that there are people that don't even understand because they haven't had that experience in a relationship or in a work environment where somebody respects their boundaries and doesn't ask them to do things that are outside of the bounds of no. And I feel like most people feel like, but where's that? And it's there, but the person that is in that kind of a work environment is going to continue to get their boundaries pushed because they're not setting boundaries. So like there's somebody that I know right now that just got a job, and they're working under someone that I think is quite emotionally immature or narcissistic. And some other people have already said, oh yeah, I'm not even going to go around this person. And that the boss, we'll just say that boss has let the person I know that, those are all bad people. Well, they're bad because they've set boundaries. So now this person is the one that is now, being asked to do a lot of things, even when they say, but this isn't really the thing I do. And they're like, you'll be fine. You'll get it.
You'll be fine. And you're a bad person if you do it.
Right. Because those other people are bad. And that's the part where it's like, it can be really hard as a really, I call it pathologically kind, nice person, that's in their bones, to then you're in essence asking that person to stand up and say no. Which is scary. It is. Yeah.
And I think that it goes back to that job I was talking about too. I do think because I didn't, like looking back at it now, I think because I didn't set boundaries to start with, like up at, like at the beginning, and I was just okay with things, then I think it did just show that like, okay, then you can just push all my buttons and you can ask me to do pretty much anything, and I'll just step up and do it, because if I didn't set a boundary, then why would I set a boundary now?
And that's it. And that's the fact that we're talking about it. And that's where I like to say that people, okay, they did not know what they didn't know. And then they know it, but it's still hard to do it. And I know we've talked about that on other episodes. That's one of the most difficult places to be, because now that somebody's maybe aware of boundaries and they're aware that, man, I have a hard time holding my boundaries, then they feel sometimes they wish they never even knew what boundaries were. And so then, but eventually you're going to start setting your boundaries more than you don't. And then you'll get to a place where you are just a boundary setter, but it's such a progression. And then if people aren't listening to something like this, or they aren't going to work on it, maybe with a therapist, then I believe that they're just slowly becoming more and more of what they are doing, because they're unwilling to to self-confront or deal with the discomfort or, risk that.
Yeah. And so I feel like you have to like practice.
You do.
Almost.
You totally do.
Because I feel like I've tried to do that with even little things. Like I was telling you not too long ago, I had some friends ask if I wanted to drive an hour away and go on this hike and then do this whole thing. And to me, that was like 2 of my big anxiety things. And so I was like really nervous too, but I just, instead of making an excuse or trying to get out of it, I did just throw out a kind of straight up, I'm being super honest.
Yeah.
Those are 2 of my anxiety things. And I'm not really feeling up to that right now. Thank you so much for inviting me. Like, and I said whatever. And I was expecting either no response or some negative response. And the response instead was totally get it. Like, been there. I get that. Love ya.
Yeah.
We'll see you this time. Whatever.
What's funny is I have to give a certain person credit. I so appreciate that story. When I was writing my book, He's a Porn Addict, Now What? An expert and a former addict to answer your questions, where I play the role as the expert. I always like to point that part out. But the co-author, his name's John. And there would be times where we were getting behind on the manuscript, and it was mainly me getting behind on the manuscript. And I would say things like, man, I forgot about our meeting today, or I'm really far behind on something. And I remember he would just say, yeah, no, like, okay, this stuff happens. And I just remember thinking, wow, I know
you're not
that.
going to freak out.
Yeah. And I know it sounds so wild, but here I was. I mean, that was just a few years ago. And he reached out to me to be in the book project because of coming on my podcast. And so I'm supposed to feel like maybe I've got my stuff figured out. And I would over and over again find myself, if I couldn't make something or whatever, and I would realize that he would do that sometimes too. And I would say, okay, because we're both human beings that are just trying to get things done, and things come up. And I just thought, oh, that's how it's supposed to be.
Well, and I do think, as I'm learning more about what like boundaries can look like and what they are, I am surprised where it's like the people that do care about you, or do even, I don't know, have or know enough about boundaries themselves or whatever, then I feel like it's very healthy, and it is like, no, I get it. I totally get it. And it doesn't turn into an argument. It doesn't turn into like them making you feel stupid for trying to stand up for yourself. It's just like a
okay.
Like,
and
totally okay.
And you can be disappointed. I mean,
you don't have to be stoked about it.
But that doesn't mean you have to like get all angry, because that's where that anger is going to get the person to then say, no, you know what? It's okay. I'll cancel all these other things so I can make you happy.
And then things just get weird.
They'd get super weird.
Well, and that's, again, going back to this job, that's after a while of being at this job, I got to a point where I was like literally having panic attacks every time my boss would contact me, every time I'd be asked to do anything, because it got so unhealthy. But I will say, I didn't stand up for myself. I never, right? Like, looking back, I'm like, hey, I could have like said some things. I could have been a grown up about it and like not just ran away.
Hard, though.
But it's so interesting because it's like you're allowed to say the things, and then again, if it's somebody I think that is the type of person you would want to, whether it's professional and like work with, or be in a relationship with, the people you want around you are going to respect your boundaries and are going to at least try to understand them.
For real.
I think.
Well, I like that you said that you want to work with, and if not, then the concept again of differentiation is then everything in my life becomes an opportunity for me to grow and self-confront. And part of that might be me having to deal with uncomfortable situations. It might have to be with me setting a boundary and then having somebody get really angry. And maybe I can read the part that I made you wait for me to look for forever.
No, please do.
Okay, so this is from the book No More Mr. Nice Guy, which does get some, there are people that really can have challenges with it, which I understand. But that's by a guy named Glover. And the part where he talks about boundaries, I love it. He says setting boundaries. He's talking about nice guy syndrome, and it can be nice guy, nice girl, nice person syndrome, but it really is. I think as we were flipping through things here, you maybe were seeing that people that they are afraid to speak their minds or their truth, because if they feel like, if I can be a nice enough person, then everybody else will meet my needs and I don't even have to ask for things, which is a setup for.
It's not actually how it ends up.
No. So So he says boundaries are essential for survival. Learning to set boundaries allows, I'll just, where it says nice guys, I'll say people to stop feeling like helpless victims and reclaim their personal power. It's one of the most fundamental skills that he says he teaches. He says, I demonstrate the concept of boundaries by laying a shoestring on the ground. Then I tell the person that I'm going to cross their boundary and push them backwards. I instruct the person to stop me when they begin to feel uncomfortable. It's not unusual for the person to stand well back from the line, allowing me to violate their space several steps before they even begin to respond. Then once I start pushing, it's not uncommon for them to let me push them back several steps before they do anything to stop me. Sometimes they will let me push them all the way back to the wall. And he said, I use this exercise as a graphic demonstration of the need for boundaries in all areas of life. People are usually more comfortable backpedaling, giving in, and keeping the peace. And I thought that part makes so much sense. He says they believe if they take one more step backwards, the other person will quit pushing and then everything will be smooth. And how many times, I mean, I feel like I'm talking to people where people talk about, and then they rubbed out my line in the sand and they stepped right over it over and over. And then he said, yeah, right. And he said, it's not unusual for recovering nice people to go a little overboard. Then when they first learn about boundary setting, they have a tendency to swing from one extreme to the other. He said they become kamikaze boundary setters and they try to set boundaries with a sledgehammer or a machete. They usually learn in time that they only have to use as much resistance that is necessary to get the job done. And then this is this is kind of what we started with. In time, they also learn that boundary setting isn't about getting other people to be different. It's about getting themselves to be different. If somebody is crossing their boundary, it isn't the other person's problem, it's theirs. And now we're back into that world of being differentiated. What do you think?
It's deep. And I think it is hard because in one sense, I think you hear boundaries and you're talking about boundaries and it does seem like that's everybody else's problem and they should just respect.
They should just respect, yes.
And it's easy to do that and then not do any work yourself, I think.
And then I can be upset that they don't respect my boundaries.
Right. But for all you know, you're not even actually setting the boundaries or you're not even making it clear. Maybe you are and it's just that person's
and we'll talk about that.
That's the thing too. But I think it's deep to turn it inward and be like, no, you have to kind of be uncomfortable and find a way to set boundaries or find the confidence to be able to speak up for yourself. Because it is a you thing as well as as even though it's easier to just say no, that's a them thing. They
like what you're saying. It is easier because that would be easier. Again, it would be a lot easier if people would just do what I wish they would do.
Yeah, and it is partially because you do if you set the boundary, you do need them to also have the respect to follow the boundary.
Yeah,
but you can't set the boundary if you don't have the respect for yourself to set the boundary. Ooh,
there's a hot take. That was a good one. Mark that down. 34 minutes. That was good. I like that a lot. And so, matter of fact, that would fit in nice. So in the world of emotional immaturity and narcissism, on my Waking Up to Narcissism podcast, I talk about these 5 things of interacting with, we'll just say, an emotionally immature person, which would be somebody that is going to push boundaries. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I talk about is raise your emotional baseline. So that's self-care, because you got to be in a good spot to be able to deal with people that are going to push your boundaries. And self-care isn't selfish and all that wonderful stuff. Mm-hmm. Then the next one's to get your PhD in gaslighting, because you got to know what's going on. Yeah. Then the third one is get out of unproductive conversations. And then the fourth one I say is learn to set healthy boundaries. And so, because if you don't get out of, let's say that you're feeling bad, you're already down a peg. And then if somebody's trying to gaslight you, you're going to feel crazy. So that third one, you got to get out of unproductive conversations. And one of the ways you'll have to do that is to set healthy boundaries. But then, and the last one is I say that you can never give the other person the aha moment or the epiphany. Like they have to have that themselves. But back to that boundary one. And then one of the keys is I say that when you set boundaries, just know that typically the emotionally immature person sees a boundary as a challenge. And so they're going to run right through it because that's a way that they keep control or take that one up position. Yeah. So then when you set the boundary, then
it's like an infight.
Yeah. And so at some point, with a lot of the people I work with, then they realize that, wow, once I set the boundary, that person is not only not respecting it, but it seems like they're almost just running right through it.
They're waiting for it so that they can run right through it.
Yeah. And then that becomes a little bit of okay, I see what I'm working with here.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
But because I do feel like there's a big side of self-awareness that has to be there. Mm-hmm. And again, almost, I don't even know if confidence is the right word, but I do feel like, I don't know, you have to have some form of respect or
you're spot on
or something.
Or else you'll feel like you deserve, I shouldn't have said that. Or maybe I am being too bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Where I have just then flipped it around to just, almost then I guess I deserve that. Or
yeah.
To play that.
And nobody deserves it.
Hard. No, nobody does, but it is easy to then just go, well, there must have been a reason. They must have done that for a reason, and that's fine. They probably know more. And it's like, no, you can know yourself and be aware enough of yourself and confident enough and just respect yourself enough to be like, no, here's my boundaries. I deserve whatever boundary I'm setting.
Yep.
And then you're allowed to expect people to.
Yeah. And if somebody here is sitting there saying, okay, well, I know there's a part though that it's like, okay, I will give them an opportunity. We can have a conversation about it. But I often feel like if you're the one that's finally trying to set boundaries and the person is pushing against them, and I don't want to just go all or nothing and say, then it's too late. But it's, I would want, it is because I would want that person to say, hey, I noticed that you've been walking out of the room more lately. Tell me what that's about. But if it's at that point, the person's not going to go, interesting. My wife is walking out of the room. He's going to be saying, oh, you run away then. Like,
Right,
you know,
it's like huh, I wonder what they might
right.
be doing. Maybe
Yeah,
I should go ask
exactly. And then wait, and could it be me? You know, it's,
right,
and
that's
that's
not
the,
where the mind is
no, it's not. So
typically
a lot
gonna
of times
go.
that's why I feel like a boundary does become, you know, I'm sitting here saying, all right, and then here are the tools to have a conversation around a boundary.
Yeah.
But then when you're dealing with somebody that's not doing their own work, isn't trying to look outside of themselves, isn't trying to look, you know, confront themselves, then that person is like, almost, I call it, using it like an attack surface. So then they're saying, oh, really? So you think that it's fine to just walk away then in the middle of a conversation? And then if, you know, if she's saying, well, I feel like at some point though, you're just telling me I'm wrong about everything, that nothing's my fault. It's like, why? Do you think you're perfect then? I mean, is that what? And that's where we're pushing the buttons, and that's where the boundary becomes a challenge. And so then that's where I feel like I can work with people that then when they can start to sit back and recognize gaslighting, and then, oh, okay. And then, so now that I am asking for a boundary to be set, then now he does not like that. So he is letting me know that he thinks that I am now I'm being immature. Now I'm being the one that's, you know, isn't that wild?
It's wild, but it makes sense when it doesn't justify it, but it makes, you know, I'm like, okay, I see how that just blows up.
It does.
So quickly.
Yeah.
From that.
And that's why, so I get these examples of people that just say, but then they'll say things like, but I don't want to, if I was trying to bring something up, I feel like we would be having disagreements or arguments all the time. And sometimes I feel like that's the them issue, where if they can hook to the, well, then we will always have these disagreements and these things all the time. Then I don't have to bring them up. Then I don't have to try to set a boundary, but I also, then I don't have to, you know, really try to understand where somebody else is coming from. Because here's the part that when I really do, Mac, I say that I think all of us are immature until we're not. And so one of the most interesting things that I will find are when couples will come in and one person is coming in because they accuse the other person of being more emotionally immature and narcissistic. And so then, but then I'm looking at them and nobody had the right tools. I mean, and that's what I think we're learning. Nobody knew how to set boundaries well. Nobody knew how to express themselves without, you know, a little bit of manipulation or that sort of thing. And so then when somebody finally does say, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense to me. Now I can understand, you know, in essence, it's almost like a give me a chance. The other person is like, I mean, but then I might have to look at some of the things I might not be doing perfect as well. So no, I just like it better. Like, no, you know what? Yeah, I don't know if I can trust you now, and that's where I think it's just so fascinating. And one other real quick thing, when I was looking at some notes about, I was looking at this thing, intermittent reinforcement. It's like the trauma bond, but just this line alone is that it was talking about boundaries. When you give into a nagging child once, then the child will continue to nag and push your boundaries. They will learn that after a certain amount of time that they will get what they want. And this little concept is where I think we all as parents do a little bit of we're handing the kids the keys to the pushing boundaries. Because what I love, and I love this concept, because when you step back and look at how we all get out of our discomfort, is if a parent is saying, you know, we're at the store, and of course you never did this, but if a kid was like, I want a snack or I want a toy, and the parent's like, not right now, you know, not right now. We're going to eat when we get home, or you wait till your birthday or Christmas. And the kid's like, I want it. And then the parent will go, okay, just this one time.
Anything to stop.
Yep, just one time. And then the kid will be happy. And then the parent, their anxiety is relieved. But the parent feels like, okay, I told them we're not doing this again. The kid, none of that matters to them.
No,
they got their needs met.
So if I freak out and I push the buttons, I get what I want. And so it's like, it makes sense in how that would go to then an emotionally immature adult where they're like, okay, well, I noticed when I
want this thing. This point,
you freaked out. So now I know.
Isn't that funny?
I'm just going to keep doing that until you freak out.
Yeah. So that's what it just shows you. You have to dig deep and
you do
work on your own stuff.
Yeah. But then, okay. So then what would you say like are either tips or just what would you say to someone then that is, if they are noticing like, okay, I feel like I'm in a situation like this, how do you even start the process of setting the boundaries?
It's such a good question. And I think this is where I think we joke sometimes about awareness doesn't end up being so cool. But it's such a big part of it where people are going to become aware. And that's where, again, I go, they didn't know what they didn't know. And then they know, and that they know, but they don't do. It's kind of uncomfortable. It's super uncomfortable. And that's like the part where I think a lot of people, even when they hear this, are going to probably be in that spot. And that's where, you know, somebody just says, what, like, I don't know, how long is this going to take? And then I say,
it's this like call to action. It's kind of like, you have to kind of put in the work here.
Yeah.
And it's not fun to hear.
No, and over on my Wake Up to Narcissism podcast, I just did another episode on the amygdala hijack. And I think that is something that really needs to be looked at, because the emotionally immature person, the toddler, we'll call them at this point,
Okay.
then if they push your buttons and you get angry and elevated, then typically they get their way and you apologize and you beat yourself up. So they win all around.
Just completely.
So it's going to be really uncomfortable, because the whole reason I do the amygdala hijack episodes is somebody had asked me a long time ago, they say, what do I do in that situation? And I thought it was hilarious. And I said, oh, you build a time machine, you go back a couple of years and you start doing meditation and mindfulness. Because if you are in that situation where you are in a relationship and they know how to push your buttons consciously or subconsciously, then it's going to happen. So then you have to do the work when you are away from that person or that situation. You have to give yourself grace and you have to acknowledge that, okay, I'm noticing this. And then that's the part where please start doing meditation and yoga and go see a therapist and read more about it. And just, you have to start building the internal muscles first before you can, because a lot of times people will say, okay, I heard Tony and Mackie talk about it, so I'm going to go and I'm going to say, hey, don't you say those things anymore. I'm going to leave. And then you will hear that emotionally immature person not go, man, I really I'm proud of you for your boundaries. They will say, are you kidding me?
Right.
Like, are you Gandhi now or something? And then all of a sudden the person's like, oh, I don't know what to say to that one. And then they're angry and they're elevated. And
then it's kind of, then they're just like, okay, we're not going to try that again.
No, right. And then they just and then they can feel even worse about, oh, I don't even know how to hold boundaries. I'm really broken.
Right. But then that's why I feel like it's almost which sucks, but it's almost a practice.
It's a total practice.
Little things here and there.
Yeah.
Like filter in something, just try something little, and then
like you said, just even saying no to something. Today when we were trading messages about what time did you want to come or not, I mean, I'm super proud of you, because I feel like you will tell me when you want to or don't want to. Yeah. And I think that's different.
Because there definitely was a time where I would just be like, whatever's easy for you, just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And again, I still do that sometimes, but working on just kind of being like, okay, this would actually be better for me.
That's so good
for me, and just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
And at least letting it be a conversation, I think, is the thing, because then they would give you the chance, like, say, we're trying to record a podcast, and I said, okay, this time would be easier for me, but I could do whatever. Then you get a chance to say, well, this would be easier for me.
That's what,
right? And then we both can sit there and then be like, okay, let's do this then, because that'll be easier for both of us.
And today that really, I mean, I had a client, we're doing a couple podcasts, we got dinner, because they're, and all this stuff. And it was funny, because if you were just saying like, whatever you want to do, then I in my mind, it's okay. I need some help here with what works for other people. And
yeah. And I'm like, well, I'm good right now. Let's just,
and we're here. It is so good.
And so, so it's like, I feel like there's a way to go about, like, there's a way where you can have boundaries and still be nice too, which I think is big, because I think in my head for a long time, it felt like, if I'm having boundaries and if I'm saying no, then I'm the bad guy and I'm mean.
Totally.
Like, I'm just so mean because I'm saying no. And that's not the case. As a human being, you are so allowed to say no.
Yep.
In any scenario, in any case. Like, I think that's what I'm learning too as an adult, where it's like, you can say no in any, because there's all the no means no, you hear that all the time. And it's very real in every context, though, where it's like, it can just be a little thing. Like, you want to hang out with me right now? It's like, no.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I'm not feeling up to it. No. And it's like, that's okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make you the bad guy.
Because then if the other person's like, oh man, I was sure hoping we were going to hang out. Yeah. It really is a them issue at that point.
Because then it's, again, you're allowed to feel the disappointment. You're allowed to be bummed, but then it's, well, let's find a time that we can, or let's, there's a way to move forward with it. Where I think everyone can still be nice. And it doesn't have to be.
That's really good, Mac.
Mean. But I do think it can be, I don't know, it can just be scary, and it's hard because you don't want to feel like a bad guy.
Well, for those watching, this is going to be an anticlimactic thing that I had to grab a pen for. Okay. But then I like what you're saying, because I feel like we go from nice guy syndrome and passive, and I give in to everything and whatever. Yeah. And then it's like when we learn the boundary, it swings all the way over to here. And that's where it's like, look, I said no, that kind of thing.
Screaming and yelling.
Yeah. Like, and that gives the immature, right. And that gives them power. And then eventually we kind of settle in what I call the calm, confident energy, where then I can say, oh no, I'm okay, or I don't think I would like to anymore. And then when the person then reacts, then now I'm able to stay. And I'm really looking lately, we'll probably talk about this more in future episodes, but the concepts of emotional consistency and emotional stability. Okay, yeah. And I think those are things that I want to pay more attention to, because I think the more emotionally consistent somebody is with their boundaries, with their wants and needs, desires, all that stuff, then they become more safe in a relationship and easier to come to. Because if you know that I'm going to be honest with you, but I'm also not going to pull like the victim card or get angry, then it's going to be pretty easy to then say, what do you think about this? And
again, open up the conversation and not have it just be a shut down type of thing.
So good.
Okay, so I have one more question.
Okay.
And just another quote I'll read. And
Okay. Then we'll wrap her up. Okay.
But then just shifting it a little bit, because I feel like we've mentioned like professional environments and kind of relationship things.
Yeah.
Which again are all very important. But then let's just shift it to family for a second.
Yeah.
Because we did kind of talk about this in our last episode of just, working through parent-child relationships.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like as a parent, like how do you set healthy familial boundaries with children?
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess it could even go other ways too, though. If you're the kid, like how do you, I don't know.
Well, it does, but
yeah.
it's funny because I think it goes back to what we did the episode on
Yeah.
last week and I ended up doing an episode on the virtual couch about it because I thought it was such a good topic.
Yeah.
But I mean, a kid setting boundaries with a parent is pretty hard to ask. And I've worked with a couple of teenagers over the years that where it really has been a thing where they react because the parent's inconsistency. And so then that's a hard one because the parent is still the one that's kind of in charge of a lot of things that, the kid has.
And then I feel like it's different too, just for the sake of, because I think almost like we were saying with a, with a work type of relationship, it's, you're allowed to, like, if it's not good for you, you can walk away and you can step away and you can be done with it. And even a relationship, if it gets to that point where you're like, okay, this is not good for either of us, you just break up and you go your separate ways.
Yeah, you're right.
But I feel like there's a different level when it becomes
familial
family, which I mean, you're technically still allowed to just say, I'm done.
And
but it's a lot more complicated.
Well, when I deal with a lot of people in my practice that more than I think people would know, that a lot of the things that they're struggling with are that, that concept where they say, I know I should care more. I know I should love more. I know I should be more close with, but then the fact if they aren't, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It means that there probably were circumstances or situations over the years that built up to then this is how they feel.
Yeah.
So they'll maybe more come in with okay, check this out. This is how I feel. And then I would like more of a connection, but every time I try to have one, then I don't know, there's no response, or I'm told I'm wrong, and so then over time, it's like their own, go back to that concept of trauma, as hard as that sounds, body keeps the score, but your own brain stops trying to make that connection if that connection has not been reciprocated.
Yeah.
And so that one's one where then it has to be really intentional. And I've had people almost even have to set, reminders of, hey, check in on parent, and then what can be really difficult is then the inconsistency in response to that, where then parent either won't respond back or will say something about, I don't know, it can be really hard. But then if you really are coming from that place of differentiation, then you really can still look at that like, okay, it's still, this is all a me thing.
Yeah.
So I can still continue to reach out, even if I'm getting no response, even if I'm being told I'm still not doing it right, even if I'm told it's my fault and not the parents or, but I just think that I personally feel like what I see so much in talking to actual human beings about this week after week is that you can put things in an article, a podcast, or a book, but then the real human being behind it has so much of their own nature, nurture, birth order, DNA, abandonment, rejection, hopes, fears, dreams, experiences that go into that moment, that it's still hard to just say to somebody, oh, but just keep on going. Even if every time you do it, you feel worse, because at some point your brain's a don't get killed device and it's saying, why are you doing this? Time's short.
Why are we doing this terrible thing?
Yeah, so that's hard.
No, it is hard. But that is yeah.
Is this a way that you're saying you're breaking up with your mom, your mom and I?
So actually, this is my official announcement.
Okay.
I'm done. No.
Bound to read.
No, I just know that can be such a tough one, because I feel like, again, I was talking to one of my clients about this, and it was more of she was coming at it from here's these friends that treat me this way, and basically like I always leave and I'm unhappy and I feel stupid and I feel like taken advantage of and all these things. And we talked through it a lot and kind of came to the conclusion of maybe this isn't a good thing for you anymore. And I think it's, and kind of ended as I think it's okay to at least take a step back, or like at least maybe these aren't your friends that you tell everything to, and maybe these aren't your friends that you spend all the time with. Because she's like, we have fun. It's just not like, then anytime it becomes serious, bad things happen basically. And so it's like, then maybe these are your people that we keep it lighthearted and we keep
surface level sometimes. I say,
and just the occasional thing. But if it's affecting you negatively, and if you're leaving feeling bad every time, then it's okay to get out of it. But again, it's like, I do think we can acknowledge that if it's family, it does add a level.
I like how you're saying that. It adds a level. Complicated. Because somebody that maybe grew up with the healthy boundaries and a good relationship with their parent or whatever might hear that and say, well, why are you even trying?
Yeah, seriously though.
Yeah.
So that, okay, yeah.
But then the person that is trying is going to say, well, because I am. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. And, you know, it's hard.
Deep stuff.
Deep, but this is a fun one. I like this one. I like this one a lot.
Yeah. Okay, then I'll just end with one other quote, which again, I don't really remember what it says. So if it actually goes against everything we just said, we'll let it out.
Okay.
But it says, boundaries have nothing to do with whether you love someone or not. They are not judgments, punishments, or betrayals. They are a purely peaceful thing. The basic principles you identify for yourself that define the behaviors that you will tolerate from others, as well as the responses you will have to those behaviors. Boundaries teach people how to treat you, and they teach you how to respect yourself.
That's really good.
That's pretty good.
It was really good. It is, because I mean, it goes back to, I mean, that made me think about that. Even the person has a difficult time holding boundaries, if they continue to do it and don't react and become more emotionally consistent, then I mean, it really does. You can really see clearly that it's coming from a place of like peace and love, because I don't think anybody wants to get in the disagreements and arguments and feel bad.
Right.
But we just don't know how to communicate effectively at some point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Mackie, what a joy.
What a joy.
Okay, will you come back and do another one here while you're in town?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
What a pleasure. You're wearing my virtual couch hat.
Yeah. Makes
me very happy. Wait, where's that shirt? Love your face.
It's not a thing. It's never been a thing.
Okay, well, it's not with that attitude.
Okay.
Okay, I never know how to say, like, wrap it up.
We don't have a good way to say bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.